Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I am delighted to have Yasuhiko Kimura back for these monthly conversations. Today's topic is going to be inner and outer transformation. So welcome, Yasuhiko.
Thank you. This is one of my joyful moment in life. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yasuhiko. So let's start by asking you, what is transformation and what is involved in human transformation?
So I think we decided on this topic a few months ago, and it says inner and outer transformation. So let's actually deconstruct those three words. What is transformation? What is inner and what is outer? Mm-hmm. And transformation we use here is radical change. So change is constant in life, in nature, and the universe. But transformation is the change that happens at the root of things, radical. So it is a fundamental change as opposed to, minor changes, mm-hmm. modifications. Mm-hmm. And so what is inner world and inner transformation? And 1 month ago, we had a conversation about 3 stages of self-realization. And many of the people who are in that conversation, I can see them. And just like the comedian who don't want to repeat the same joke twice to the same audience, I will not repeat the same thing I said 1 month ago. And those of you who have not listened to it, there's always that videotape available. So I will say something different to keep people be entertained. So what is inner? Now people say, look within. What does it mean, within? What is inner world? And most of us, assume, my body is here, so inner is somewhere here, and outer somewhere there. So in the boundary of my skin, what is outside the skin is outer, and what is inner of my skin is inner. But obviously it is a very superficial mm-hmm. definition. And in the Eastern tradition, when they talk about inner world, it is a world that is within your consciousness, which means your world is the world of your experience in every moment of your life. So everything that emerges in my experience is in my consciousness. So this universe and this world is my universe, my world. Actually, I am a universe and I am a world. So what is outside? We have no window into this. So as you know, I have expanded the concept of monad from Leibniz. And Leibniz monad is basically atoms with individuality. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he sees the universe, monad is a unit of, universe, nature. And then comes Bakunin Fuller many centuries later, as great a genius as Leibniz. And he defines the universe as the aggregate of all humanities consciously apprehended and communicated, non-simultaneous and only partially overlapping experiences. And each unit of experience is a monad. Each unit of experience is you. And you and I, as a monad, as a world, as a universe, come together and create this aggregate, which is the universe, the universe. That is outside. So the universe is like an abstraction. It is a scenario. That's what, Buckminster talks about, scenario. Now, so if we see inner world as I am defining, inner transformation means that transformation takes place as a world, as a universe, which means you and I may share same phenomena within your universe and my universe. But if I am internally transformed, which means my world of experience is transformed, how those phenomena shows up in my universe is different from the way it shows up in your universe. That's why Buddha said when he got enlightened, whole world got enlightened. So your so-called inner spiritual transformation, seen from this perspective, your monad itself, you as a monad, you as a world, you as a universe, which is a unit of the universe, is being transformed. So the world in which you live in this way, your inner world, may be extremely different from other monads, other experiences. So same person showing up in your universe, in my universe, shows up differently. And my relationship to that person is different from the way you relate to that person.
Wow.
So inner transformation from this perspective is no different from world transformation. So imagine that we have people whose inner world, in the way I'm defining it, is transformed. And their universe is enlightened, where love predominates, joy predominates, and even the suffering of others shows up differently. Although you have an emotion of empathy and compassion, how they show up is different, because they show up in the most fundamental emotion, which is ecstasy. And you begin to see what is called suffering from a different perspective. So for Buddha, life isn't suffering. Life is an ecstasy. And a person whose inner world, whose monad, whose world is ecstasy, begin to relate to others, which is outside, society will change, number one. So inner transformation in a traditional sense, we talked about in our last conversation, 3 stages of self-realization. That is, you can say, 3 stages of transformation, inner transformation. That is a valid conversation. Now, I am expanding that notion as an experience of somebody who have been transformed in the way we described. The world is transformed in their experience. So the world experience in and as Buddha is different from the world that is experienced in and as a dictator, criminals, or even just ordinary humans who are still asleep, are different. And without having that experience of inner transformation in the way I'm defining, participating in the act of transforming the world lacks essential component. So in this sense, this inner transformation is an outer transformation. Your world is transformed. Your universe is transformed. And there's a difference in the way things shows up in your life. So there is fundamentally, in that world, there is no duality of good and evil. It is a manifestation of oneness into differentiation. So there is evil, yes, and you recognize it, but how you deal with what is called evil is different from the people who are fighting against the evil. Because evil has its own function in the evolutionary process of life and the universe. If there is no shadow which shows up because there is some object and then light shines and there's a shadow. If the object you takes out, there is no shadow, no light. So there is evil and good and evil existing because there's something in this level of reality that reflect the light of goodness, divine light into two. But you can see this, then you begin to relate to good and evil differently. And evolutionary, instead of devolutional, there's an evolutionary movement that can take place. So from this perspective, inner and outer transformation are one and the same.
Wonderful. Let me ask some questions to kind of clarify,
yes,
to make sure that people relate it to other things that they might have thought of, or they might, that everybody thinks. So one approach I want to come at it as kind of Western approach versus Eastern approach. Western approach most often starts with the external world. So they looks at reality as world of things, and then regards kind of human beings as just one of those things, and kind of deals with it. What you're saying is that there is a sovereignty within each individual. So the kind of the seat of the power is within each individual.
Beautiful, yes.
And that it is through their engaging the world and each other in the process that the world that we see is being created. So there is like, it's like another way of looking at it is in terms of kind of social and individual. So people kind of start with the society, that there is this society and I'm just one of the persons in the society. So, kind of a very small, tiny part of the society. But what you're saying is that, no, it's actually these monads, these sovereign individuals within a society where the seat of the power is, and the society, kind of societal structures that we see are kind of a result of these people either acting according to their nature, producing an amazing structure, or not according to their nature, so kind of limiting what kind of is that what you're talking about?
That is implied, and you have kind of extrapolated from what is implied, which we are going into in the next few minutes. But so that's, you know, absolutely consistent with what I said. But now I want to talk about the external.
Please.
There is an external beyond what I said. So from the monadological perspective, inner and outer are the same, and you are a world. Now, it is a world of experience. And I cannot experience your experience. You cannot experience my experience. So you show up in my experience, and I show up in your experience, and everything else show up constituting your universe. Now, so this is monadology. Now we will move into sociology. I'm not talking about solipsistic universe. There are things,
Yes.
yes, which shows up in my experience, but there are things.
Yes.
Independent. So after I die, there are still things that exist. I'm not denying that at all, okay? But when I'm born, things shows up in our experience, in my experience, that constitute my world. And that my world has my flavor, so to speak. And it is different from other people's flavors. And that can have a flavor of ecstasy and joy and love, or it can have an ecstasy of hatred and envy and jealousy. And it is a lot to do with how you are. That's number one. Number two, so you as a world and I as a world now talking. You show up in my experience and I show up in your experience. And how do I know that you understand what I'm saying? Because I can't experience your experience. How do I know that you actually understand me, and vice versa? And speaking of sociology, one of the greatest sociologists of last century, Nicholas Luhmann, had a brilliant new idea. And I think it is correct, in my view. Unit of society is not people. Unit of society is communication. And communication is a structure that constitutes information, utterance, and understanding. So there is a speaking and understanding, and it is information is conveyed through speaking and being understood. Which means if there is no understanding, there is no communication. In order for communication to take place, there needs to be information, utterance, and understanding. So actually, when those three, the structure exists, communication communicates. It is not the people. That structure communicates itself. It is an ongoing creation. If society, the unit of society, and the substance of sociology is communication, and communication constitutes information, utterance, or speaking, or writing, and understanding. So even if you're listening, if you don't understand, there's no communication. Understanding is essential. And now, from our monadological perspective, I can't experience your experience. So in my experience, there is no verification whether or not you are understanding what I'm saying right now. And somebody may say, oh, he may be just doing that. You know, there's no way for me to know. Of course, there are many other ways of verifying, but for now, okay. So with that understanding, there's no communication. And communication is a unit of society. So Buckminster Fuller's definition of universe is a universe as a sociology. And each unit of universe is a monad. So to transform the world is to transform the communication. First, we need to make sure that understanding is in place. And this all of us can really reflect. And those of us who have spent enough time understanding, know how difficult it is to understand anything.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it takes years of study before you can actually understand it. So you understand this, now you can understand this, you can. So, I have professional mathematicians as my friend. If they send me their paper, I won't be able to understand because, I haven't spent enough time to study what it takes to understand their papers. So understanding is not easy. And what is happening in the society is understanding has been replaced by beliefs. Of course, there are two kinds of beliefs. One belief, in the way, somebody asked me last time, belief that is after you go through rigorous process of thinking, and eventually you reach the point of understanding, and therefore it is a belief. That's one way of saying it. But the belief I'm talking about is not that kind of belief. It is something people of authority say something, and you take it as true. When we are small, we believe what our parents or teachers say. In the past, people used to believe in priests and ministers and the Bibles. And today, they believe in professors and intellectuals. Sometimes people even believe in Hollywood celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody with fame or some kind of a qualification accepted, they believe it. So if understanding is essential for communication, when people just believe it and conveying whatever they believe, although people are talking, people are writing, no real communication is taking place, which means unit of society doesn't exist in that area, which means semiotic and semantic integrity of the world and society is absent. There's a disintegration of society taking place right there because there is no communication, no understanding. People are just repeating the beliefs, information, and much of the beliefs that the people have are originally intend to be a lie. How much lie people believe. They don't even question. That's how the power structure of the world manipulates people. They believe it. There are this new viruses, and if you don't get the vaccination, you'll be dead. There is no scientific proof yet, but because people are afraid, they believe it. But before they believe this, they are already programmed and conditioned in such a way that we are believing almost anything. Much of the belief people used to have, now we say the total nonsense. And today, people have a different set of nonsense in which they believe. So the initial stage of outer transformation is restoration of authentic communication amongst people, which means as many humans as possible need to start think and question and then begin to understand the truth and apprehend and comprehend reality. Otherwise, people live inside narrative reality, not an actual reality. A narrative reality, which is propagated through the propaganda known as media and academia. You see, scientific method was a brilliant methodology to break that vicious cycle of beliefs, because it is based on asking questions, thinking logically, and verifying with actual evidence. Before, priest said, God said this, and if you believe it, fine. If you don't, and if you question, at worst, you'll be burned at the stake. And today we have a similar phenomenon. There are kind of authorities, media and academia, and people with power or fame, and they spew out all kinds of nonsense, non-verified beliefs, and people believe. So what the initial transformation we need in terms of external transformation is to actually wake people up from their metaphysical slumber, living inside the belief, into open to this actual reality, and being able to think and understand, which means we who are aware of this find a way to communicate which encourages understanding. And some people, like Buckminster Fuller, one of my most favorite thinkers of all time, people say it is difficult to understand, and it was intentional. He wrote in that way: either you understand or you don't understand at all.
Mm-hmm.
There's no between. You can't make any belief out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And Zen masters, they do that with asking questions which you cannot answer with your beliefs. So, but in a daily conversation, you can't be Buckminster Fuller, you can't be Zen masters. But you want to communicate in such a way that people's beliefs are challenged, and somehow guide them in a direction where they begin to see what they think they know is just a belief. And now the communication, so there's a understanding. In order to create this understanding, you need to somehow change the utterance.
Mm-hmm.
Also the information. And the people say, what is information? There are many different most people say what they know what information is, and there are many different definitions of information. And Gregory Bateson, another great thinker, defined information as the difference that makes the difference. And you know, the difference between understanding and just knowing or believing is that when understanding takes place, there is a state shift in your being. When you understand something, it is not just an intellectually, getting this concept. There is an element of a ontological shift. It is a understanding is something of being. There's an understanding really actually shift your being. Sometimes huge, sometimes a little bit. But next time when you understand something for the first time, something you didn't understand for, and then somehow you read and think and eventually you understand something. There's a shift in being. That you become wiser. You don't become knowledgeable. You become really wiser. So information is the difference that makes the difference. And when information is conveyed through the utterance, state shift on the part of listener takes place. That is understanding. Wow. And that kind of communication rarely happens.
Wow.
Yes?
Yes, absolutely.
And so right now, we are speaking something very abstract. And given the brilliance of your audience, they understand. And if they understand, I think that each one of them have some sense of stage shift. But now, if we go out and want to convey this to other people who don't have a much philosophical background and stuff, you have to change. And so communication communicates. So when you and I in communication, immediately you and I create a structure communication, and that structure continue to recreate itself. That is communication. Yes. Yes. And utterance changes based on whom you are having conversation with. The biggest, the most difficult and the biggest challenge I had as a public speaker in my life was talking to 500 inner city high school students and 250 middle school inner city students in Los Angeles. One of my students had a project, and he was at the graduate school in USC, and his project was to do something for the inner city kids. And one was inviting somebody to give them talk about thinking and happiness. And he got the idea from my course, so that was his subject. And so I had 3 speeches. One is 250 high school, and 250 middle school, and talking about happiness and thinking and their connection to a 12, 13 years old is not easy. But at the end of, and also it was not easy to keep them for 90 minutes paying attention to you. 90 minutes, all 3. The challenge was how to keep them engaged for 90 minutes. And secondly, how to convey this actually very, in a way, simple but very deep understanding about thinking and happiness. And I was successful at that one. And it was the most gratifying experience as a speaker. Understand, I don't know if all the 250, I don't know, but many of them understood because of the way, the question they asked me. Without understanding what I said, they couldn't ask that kind of question. So there was a state shift. So, we transforming the external world. We need to transform our communication. Actually, we need to establish the proper an authentic unit of society, which is a structured communication. And then information that we deliver needs to be the difference that makes the difference. Wow. So most of the time people just repeat the same thing they know over and over again. It is not a communication. And you see today, I do Twitter. It's extremely difficult to communicate philosophical thought in Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize people who understand what I'm talking about, people already know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People who don't understand. And there's no point in talking about it. So I don't go into philosophy on Twitter anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Rarely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And means of communication we have today, and we are so busy.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking and understanding requires time. Society is moving in more and more in the direction of lack of understanding, lack of communication, despite the fact that we have more technology for communication. So that is a serious issue we need to address today.
Wow.
So that is that is my outer transformation.
Okay, wonderful. I want to ask, I want to make some comments about what I understand what you're saying, and just ask some questions to elaborate it in slightly different ways so we communicate. I want to make sure that most people get what we are saying. So firstly, kind of going back to the point, you started by emphasizing the subjective experience, that we experience things, and that is where the monad is. There is the outside world, there is objects out there, and there is a subject. Both these exist, and both these exist, and you can't lose track of. So that was like the starting point, which I was not, I think I did not do a good job of specifying that distinction, object and subject distinction. The second point about the outer transformation is the interaction between the subjects. So I like to use Julian Jaynes' idea that each of us has this mental space. Mm-hmm. Of where we are kind of playing out what the world is like, what we are trying to do. And the other person is also doing the same thing. So in order to actually communicate to somebody else is actually very challenging, because they don't have access to my mental space.
Yes, exactly.
I don't have access to their mental space. So we need to do something which is outside, which is the information, which both of us have access to. I'm speaking it, they are listening to it. They can also speak it and listen to it. So there is this feedback loop possible through the information, but the fact that my mental space and that other person's mental space are not directly accessible. It is they're connected only through that information. So in that sense, that it's crucially important, that information that is going through is crucially important. So that's one point. The second point, and what happens is that the lots of mistakes come from not realizing that other person has a separate mental space. So you just assume that it's the same thing and act accordingly, or not even have a concept of it. So you're not really seeing this difference. The second point is that of feedback loops. I think the feedback loops I find are critical for communication, because I find that no matter how hard I try, I really, I can put all the work in doing the information right, but I really need a receipt from the other person, some proof that they have gotten it. So generally what I try to do if somebody is speaking to me is that I say, this is what I understand from what you're saying. Is that correct? So it is like a complete loop. I got the information, I'm putting information back, and the person checks it against their, that is one of the simplest things that I have found of making sure that there is communication. Mm-hmm. The other point that you're making is very, very deep, that there is very little communication going on. People are just going about assuming a whole bunch of things, assuming a whole set of ideas. And the way you do that is, again, it comes back to the point that you're making, that individual is sovereign. If you default on the responsibility of understanding, then you're going to have beliefs, and that beliefs are going to be somebody else's beliefs that you just
That's
picked
right.
up. Okay, and you may think it is your beliefs, but it is through, there is an entire osmosis taking place of, you kind of trusting your parents, your culture, the celebrities, the authorities, the academics, and it just seeps into you. Unless you make the concerted effort of saying, is this true?
Yes.
Of genuinely asking a question. The other part of it is that I find that most people, they just want answers. Another way of putting it, they just want answers. They really don't like questions.
Yes.
So another way of saying, of fundamentality of understanding through individual is the primacy of questions.
Yeah.
Asking.
Yes.
So these are some of the thoughts and questions I had. What do you think?
Yes, but we began this a private conversation with the subject of language.
Yes.
And let me add a little bit that dimension. Then maybe we can go into idiosphere.
Yes.
And so when we communicate, we use language. And you see, as you said, I don't know. I don't have your mental space, and you don't have my mental space. I don't experience your experience, and you don't experience my experience. At the same time, understanding is something like recreating other person's experience or mental state, mental space. Okay, and how is it possible to do that? And so language, one way to define language is it is a model of reality. So Japanese have a model of reality, and all kinds of vocabulary, words and vocabulary connections really make up the model of the world. English, German, they're different way. And so in order for communication to take place, you need to belong to the same language community. If I speak Japanese, you have no way of zero understanding, not even possibility. And when you speak Hindu, zero possibility here. So we are speaking English, which we both think that we understand.
Yes.
Anyway, and look how much it took for us to actually learn this language.
Yes.
And so we have learned this language, meaning this English as a paradigm of reality, paradigm of the world, and we use the same vocabulary. The vocabulary has same association. Now, when you are recreating other person's experience also means conceptual experience, perceptual experience. When you are speaking to the person, sound vibration, you resonate. And that sound vibration, words have the sound aspect. Speaking has the sound aspect. It is very, very important to recognize this. And sounds are vibrations. And it is easier to understand other person in oral communication because of this sympathetic vibration take place with the sounds. Because you are not only hearing some concept, sounds that goes with the words, which goes with the concept, is also coming to you, and the person's experience is conveyed through that vibration. It is very, very important. So when you're reading, if you are reading, in most cases, people hear their own sound, their own voice. Or you can actually speed read and you don't need to have any sound. But you see, visual image is also it is vibration. And how you yes
Yes,
how,
I have to tell you this. This is really fascinating. This is what I learned from Walter Ong. So like when you're talking, right? When I'm listening to you now, I'm experiencing, I have the context of you as a person. I have the context of your gestures. I have the context of the tone of your voice, the emotional quality, the pace, the variation, all of that is alive. And that is the context. So the way in which Walter Ong puts it, he is very good at aphorisms. He says, all text is pretext.
Yes.
Because what he's and my kind of continuation of it is all text is pretext because it lacks context. Because the context is very rich when you're talking. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. I like what he says. And meaning arises only in context. And so, and context is conveyed when you write. One of the reasons why those social media is almost impossible is because no context can be conveyed. You have to write in such a way your text is also context.
Yes.
And it's extremely difficult to do.
Yes.
Especially if your thought is complex, it's almost impossible to do. So this vibration is actually conveyed. When somebody write, they use particular words, combination of words, and choice of different words. And some people's sentences are long. Buckminster Fuller's sentence is like more than 1 page long. Some people have very like a few sentences. So depending on the person, how they think is constructed in their sentence structure, and their mental space is conveyed through the context. So these are all vibrations. And you, the person who is speaking, want to speak in such a way that your speaking is in harmony with the vibration of your information. And the person receiving is being able to resonate and recreate the totality of vibrations. The person needs to be able to set aside whatever it is they have, which is almost impossible for most people. So we are all responsible, speaker and listener. Listener is responsible to set aside his or her pretext and the context, and make the mental space as empty as possible. Of course, so those assumptions and the presumptions they have has to go to the background, doesn't interfere while you're listening. The person who is speaking has to speak into the person in such a way that what you're saying is recreatable. So the whole thing is a vibration. And there's a key, and the vibrational sensitivity is a key to speaking and listening. And poetry or music, music is a pure vibration. And poetry has some concept, but it is more sounds and vibration than conceptual construct. So what happened is that beauty in the use of language has a significant impact in the way we communicate, and in the way our communication is being understood. And again, today, the beauty of language has been systematically destroyed. And meaning has been distorted or inverted, which means the music that is inherent in a communication became noise. And with noise, there is no communication whatsoever. It is only the music that is contained in a communication that communicate.
Wow.
So you see, the use of words and the way you speak need to have, we need to pay attention. We need to be a poet in that sense. Pay attention to the vibration of your thoughts and the vibration of the information you're conveying and the vibration of your expression. It's so important. Yeah.
So folks, what we are going to do is that there are two more topics that we are going to touch upon, and then I'm going to open it up for questions from you. So go ahead and type exclamation mark to line up for questions. We're going to hit two very critical topics that I really want to ask Yasuhiko about. There are two concepts that you used in that article. One is the concept of ideosphere, and second is the value of pursuing eternal truths. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so ideosphere is a made-up word. You can't touch those spheres. So if we were to locate it, it exists inside the noosphere, mental sphere, sphere of ideas. And we actually, each culture has its own ideosphere, sphere of ideas and sphere of ideation. And those spheres are internalized in our mind. So a person who is born in Germany and grew up in German language and reading German philosophers mainly, growing up in the German philosophical ideosphere, Japanese, American, British. Today it is pretty globalized. But we have when we acquire language, we enter into a particular ideosphere. And this ideosphere has a kind of structure. And that structure, up to now, is hierarchical or concentric. Some idea generators, philosopher, or great thinker, create an idea, generate an idea, and then people come around and create a circle. They do not generate ideas. They become the followers of those ideas. They are in the same idea sphere, but they are not generators of ideas. And we are talking about beliefs. Usually, maybe the first circle of the people may be able to understand the original idea. And then they may become their own idea generators. But the circle goes farther and farther away, it's only become an echo of the idea, and it becomes beliefs. And today, what is required, another aspect of external transformation, which is also internal aspect, is that change the configuration of idea sphere from concentric to omnicentric, at least polycentric, so that it is the sphere created by multitude of idea generators. And actually, this is an important aspect. A person who can generate ideas himself or herself, the person who is a real thinker, only he or she can really understand other ideas, because understanding is a recreation of a thought. A person who cannot create a thought cannot recreate it. That's why Richard Feynman said, I cannot understand anything that I cannot create. That's absolutely correct. So before he came into, became a physicist, there are quantum physics already. But he understood quantum physics, although he said anybody understands quantum physics is crazy. But he understood the science because he created it. You see, anybody who understands anybody's idea, he or she is actually creating it. So the more there are who are creators of ideas, there will be more understanding. So true believers have lack capacity and ability to understand anything. So we want to change the configuration of ideas into omnicentric.
Can I make one quick comment here? And the way I think of it is that life is not spectator sport. No. I hate spectator sport. I think you have to have participatory sport. I think if you want to really understand music, you have to produce music. If you want to really understand visual arts, you have to draw. If you want to learn how to actually read, you have to write. Because that is crucial part, and it applies across the board. Everything that you do.
Yes. And to become a great politician, you need to be able to lie.
Good point. So that omnicentric, that's a huge idea.
Yes.
Now,
so we want to, when we are transforming the world, we want to really think about changing the configuration of idiosphere from concentric to omnicentric. That's the vector of transformation.
Wonderful. Now, in the spirit of omnicentric, there are some amazing people on this call. So I'm going to call on people to ask questions. Give me just a second here. Folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark in chat or raise your hand in Zoom in order to ask questions. It's going to be Zara, Phil, and Elena next. Zara, go ahead. And folks, we have got 4 rules. First rule is type exclamation mark in chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Rule number 2, keep on topic. Rule number 3, be brief. Right now, we're just taking questions. So try to make, quick questions. Rule number 4, speak your mind, speak from your heart, disagree with anybody on anything, and do so courteously. All right, so let's start with Zara. Zara, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. So fascinating talk, and very interesting to see the things you talk about are the challenges I face in my life, which is mainly the difference between beliefs and reality, and how to communicate your reality to somebody else. But and on the topic of transformation, I think that there's an element of time to transformation, which is really very important.
Hello? I think she dropped off, but you can go ahead and answer the question.
Oh no, sorry, I must have muted by mistake.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's an element of time, which is important, a willingness to change belief, a readiness to change belief, and also people who don't understand. I don't think they are, like you said, they're not capable of understanding, right? So if that's the case, and if a connection between another person is a space between two separate mental spaces where you create a shared mental space. But if you're not going to be on that person's level, and that person will never really understand you, and maybe, for all these reasons, because of time, because of lack of willingness, because they're not ready, because they don't have the capacity to understand, what is the point? Shouldn't it be, you know, that we focus on transformation of ourselves rather than transformation of others? Because,
Thank you.
you know, yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Zara.
You see,
Folks, try to keep your questions short so we can get through as many questions as possible. Go ahead, Yasuhiko.
at the basis of belief mentality is fear. And you can see how much fear plays into what's happening in the world. And when you become fearful, you become dependent. And you want answers so that you feel secure. So one dimension of a belief mentality is the fear domination. And so this, Shirika and I discussed this before in my program, the essential virtue that is missing today, especially, is a virtue of courage. So courage is not the absence or opposite of fear. Courage is like a mastery of fear. It is the an alchemy of transmuting the base emotion of fear into the state of commitment and resolve. That is courage. And that courage is missing. And people are manipulated into believing all kinds of things. So first thing that we need to really pay attention is to move people in a direction where they become more and more encouraged. So depending on the case, you know, I cannot give any generalization, but when we are dealing with people, we want to encourage them more and more. And that encouragement will lead to people gaining more and more courage. It's very, very important. And secondly, not everybody is dead in terms of mentally dead. There are still people, actually significant number of people, whose capability for understanding is still there. And we want to speak to them. And you need to be able to discern. You know, like when I'm at Facebook, at Twitter, the moment I realize the person is not able to understand, I stop communication because there's no point. But there are people who can understand you, and you want to really communicate. So to change this, the world, the external transformation, and changing the bringing forth real communication and changing the idiosphere, we want to be very discerning to whom to speak and what to speak and how to speak to that person. And if we make a conscious effort to do this, there will be a shift. I would rather speak to one person who can understand me than 100 people who don't understand me, because their impact is different.
Yasuhiko, I have a quick follow-up on that. I mean,
Yeah.
The way I think about this is to establish common context. I find that I try to find the deepest common context that we have, because that is the only base that we actually have. Mm-hmm. And if I can discover that, then
beautiful,
I can do whatever is possible. It doesn't mean that everything is possible, but what is possible is kind of founded on that common context.
Yeah, beautiful. I agree completely. That's wonderful. Yes.
Thank you, Yasuhiko. Next up is going to be Phil, Elena, and Ambika. Phil.
Yes. Well, since true understanding is so difficult. I wonder whether these multiple spheres of knowledge does not create even more cacophony in a stable society in this sense, because you have now many spheres of knowledge that you do not understand, or even understand the shadow of that knowledge. And because of that, not only do you not understand it, it's even more difficult to create a coherence of a unified understanding. So therefore, in a sense, you are even further away from a harmony of society, even in the shadowlands.
I agree.
So I wonder whether there is some point in which there needs to be a struggle to create a coherence of multiple understandings, even in the shadowlands, to in a sense allow people to at least understand the shadows, rather than say, you must constantly live in a state of cacophony, because you may understand one sphere of knowledge, but you will always be lost in the other spheres. Could you say something about that?
Yes. So there are 6,000 different languages, including dialect. And there are 8,000 academic disciplines. 8,000. There are more academic disciplines than the language that exists on this planet. Tremendously specialized. And when we go to school, so you are given 5, 10 subjects to study. You are given. And then we begin to study them, and then you choose some of the areas you like. But you see, from the very beginning, the way we develop our knowledge is fragmented and specialized. And what I found is that, when if you are interested in some subject, and want to study this, many of those subjects are actually interconnected. And then, so when you are interested in history, there's so much to study, but you begin to expand your study. Then, obviously, some areas, you're interested, you need to learn the language of that particular time and particular geography. And those study develop into something, and at the end, you look like somebody who knows so much. But it is organically integrated in your mind, because those subjects are organically integrated, came from your pure curiosity to know something in which you're interested. So, if we begin to change our education system from the bottom, the curiosity-based education, question-based education, and allow the student to really to pursue their interests and guide them. And if you're interested in the universe, you have to study mathematics, and then when you study mathematics, you maybe get interested in music, and many things are connected. And that way, you may be extremely knowledgeable person who is also comprehensively integrated. And that's, I think, the future humanity needs to be that way. Today, it's opposite, fragmented from the beginning to the end. And now there's so much information coming, none of which we understand. And there's a total confusion going on. So then what happens? You choose one TV channel and just listen to this, and that's it. You don't want to listen to any other, because I don't want to be confused anymore. That's what's going on. So yes, I agree with you. And then to me, how to change it is the organic education in the way I described.
Thank you. Next up is Elena, Ambika, Ilya, and Laura. Elena.
Thank you, Shrikant. My question is, Yasuhiko, so in your particular cases, let's just take an example of speaking to the audience of the kids. How did you prepare yourself and the audience so your ideas would find a space in whatever the context the audience had initially?
Okay.
And I have one more question. How do you recognize your own beliefs? How do you have any technique to share? Thank you.
Say again, the second question is how?
So we all have some kind of beliefs. So believe on something. T is great or T is not great. Whatever you believe you have, right?
Okay.
How do you recognize these beliefs? How do you get present? And how do you see that you have this limiting belief?
Okay.
Yourself, your
Okay.
technique, your own technique, your own technique.
The
Thank you.
first question. I never actually prepare anything. Mira knows that. My wife knows that. Although right now I am doing online seminar and I have to end everything within particular time. I basically take a notes, but that does not mean that I read them. And in the case of speaking to this kids or any other audience, first thing that I need to know for myself that I know and understand the subject upon which of which I'm speaking. And so I know what thinking is, I know what happiness is, and I know the connection very deeply. So therefore, with any audience, I can talk about this. Then you go in front of the audience. You need to sense them. And in response, you're not only talking, you're listening to the audience. And based on their facial expressions, the way you understand, how they are listening, how I'm reaching them, and constantly adjust to their reaction and move this. And in the case of kids, high school and junior high school, I change the subjects every 10 minutes because I realized, I heard that their attention spans are 10 minutes. So I was going to do that anyway, but then I changed, but change in a way that it's kind of organically changing. There's a connection between the first subject and the second subject. And then go on and on. So only person who can actually listen to the listening of the other can really talk at the same time and communicate, because it is going both ways. That's why verbal oral communication is better, because speaker can adjust to the listener. Second question about my beliefs. Since I was 16, my life orientation was eliminate all beliefs from my consciousness. Does not mean that I don't have them. For example, I believe that I make an assumption. No, I don't believe. I think I have some assumptions. For example, I'm living under the assumption that I will be alive tomorrow morning. And one day, that assumption will be proved to be wrong, but I'm not there to know that.
Wonderful, thank you. Next up is going to be Ambika, Ilya, and Laura. Ambika.
Hi, so hello everybody. Yasuhiko, this is not just one question. I want to show you something that I started to sketch as you were speaking.
Wow.
And I don't know if you can see this side first.
Yes.
So, you were talking about how people are caught in their thinking structures.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we are also in boxes, a lot of people, as you see from also the conversations we've had about education and so on. And literally, I've heard people say, I know what they're trying to do to me. They're trying to kill me if we don't wear a mask, and I have to shake my head and keep quiet because they don't want to hear the other one. And when you ask somebody, do you want to know what's going on? They actually say no. They just don't want to know because they're stuck in it. And so when you moved on to Feynman and the whole idea of things starting to filter through and good ideas permeating, this is what came to me. And yes, it must be flowing through, but it can flow through if this structure is broken. It's already breaking, but it's so fixed, and so, and then of course, I was thinking of languages, because we have so many languages and they're all interconnected through different linguistic systems and geographical regions. And yet there are so many commonalities, but because of this pop culture thing, words have lost their real meaning.
Mhm.
And therefore that's also part of the confusion.
Mhm.
And I absolutely love what you say about courage, which has its root in heart, occur. And so the question that comes up is, what are the, this of course can go on and on. We need to change every level of education and all that stuff. But what 3 steps can people take to understand, to change their actions, and to alchemize the whole being with this idea of courage through whatever language they speak? Because when we connect after having experienced the alchemy, I think that can probably trigger this.
You see, in your question, some assumptions are already implied.
Yes.
3 steps. And if you don't believe that there are steps to some solutions, then you won't say, steps. And so every time we ask some questions, already we are revealing our assumptions. And so that everybody does, not only you, of course. So just going back, so a few days ago I was reading Sri Aurobindo's Human Cycle, which you shared in our email communication, and he was talking about, he wrote about this origin of Indian caste systems. Originally, it was a 4 aspect of divine consciousness. One is knowledge, Brahman. One is power to move and change, Kshatriya. And one is creating and exchanging wealth. How do you pronounce that?
Vaishya.
Yeah. And the last is serving others. What happened? That integrated, tetrahedron of divine consciousness, this integrated into 4 social classes. So Brahman became an intellectual, the priest. Kshatriya became politicians and warriors. And the Vaishya became the businessman. And then this maybe extremely important aspect of divine consciousness became delegated into being untouchables.
Yes.
So another way of saying what we have been discussing and creating individual sovereignty and creating courage is to, within ourselves, to integrate those 4 classes into 4 aspects of our own consciousness: intellection, knowledge, wisdom, power to move, change, and ability to create and exchange wealth, and the heart of devotion and service to others. So when we move into the social transformation, we need to be able to transform ourselves in this way. I always say those people who are unwilling or unable to be changed in the process of changing the world are not qualified to participate in the change of society. So we need to qualify ourselves to become an agent of change. And these 4 aspect of divine consciousness is extremely useful to know. Yes, so we need to be a thinker and a philosopher, and we need to have wisdom, and we need to have a power to make things happen, and if necessary, defend against the enemy. We need to have an ability to actually create wealth and support whatever it is that we are doing. And also, we need to develop this heart of service to others, so that you continuously, you're not just thinking about yourself, thinking about the whole, and serve other people. So number one step is actually encourage ourselves to become a not only transform, but transforming individual who are ongoing transforming himself or herself in the process of transforming the society. And second is, it is extremely important to have, as I said a few minutes ago, to have the discernment. And there are people whose potential and possibility has not been destroyed. There are people who don't have that. Unfortunately, it was killed. But there are people whose seed is alive, and we want to, approach them, begin to engage in a conversation, and create a community of transformers, change agents. And we need to know, whether your expertise is. You don't want to make me a business manager. It's a disaster. But I can teach, I can write, I can communicate. So those areas, you can use me. And also I'll use myself in that way. So knowing your strengths and talents, you want to use that in that way. The second step. Third step, you want to create a network of those communities and start to work with other communities. So this is a co-destiny and this synchro-destiny.
Wonderful. I want to comment on one thing. It is very interesting what you talked about, Sri Aurobindo's, that these were kind of various aspects of the divine. And isn't it fascinating that basically, no matter how great an idea you come up with, somebody ends up using a trap.
Yes, interesting. Yes, because you know what? Because they don't have a comprehensive understanding of the idea.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, next up is going to be Ilya, Laura, and David. Ilya. Go ahead. Ilya, are you there? Okay, next up is going to be Laura. Laura, you need to unmute yourself. Okay, I don't know what's happening with Laura.
I was thinking, but I think you answered some of them. I was curious in our situation politically with a Donald Trump kind of character, the model, because they're so steadfast in their belief. He's got them solidly behind all his own kingdom. Only I can do it. That people have to love me, cherish me, and all of that. And as people follow him, like the cult of Donald Trump is really hard against.
Laura, go ahead and phrase it as a question.
Okay,
go ahead.
So the other side of it, how do you fight? How do you get these two entities, in a solid war? Communication is sort of blocked on both sides. I don't see how do you break it so that somebody can get ahead? I mean, presumably the Democratic side versus the other side, I think, needs more work. And based on what you were saying, somebody.
First of all, when you say Democratic side, which side are you talking about? And what is the other side? I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I think the general question that Laura is asking is that in today's political climate, there are these groups of people who are kind of at loggerheads with each other. Mm-hmm. How do you enable communication between them? What is possible and what can you do?
You know, one of my most favorite proverbs, when there are only two alternatives to take, always take the third.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Ilya. Ilya, are you able to unmute?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom. You said earlier that you didn't have any beliefs. Was that, did I get that right?
I don't say I don't have, I have lots of assumptions, yes.
It just made me feel like you were, you know, like a Buddhist monk practicing in the mountains, but, you know, just in your mind, but actually doing it, you know, like mentally, you know, not like fantastically, but mentally. So, you know, it's very interesting. And I just, you know, I've just yesterday was writing a whole series about similar subjects such as this. In terms, so I guess I just want to make a comment, and then I'll be quiet.
Just keep it short. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. The freedom of making choices for someone who has to grow on an internal level, and I use the word freedom because it's a lack of control that comes about, you know, upon them. I feel like that is the first step to formulate a personal belief. Yeah, I guess that's all. And then furthermore, you know, once you have a personal belief, you can it becomes shareable, and you can create perhaps a community or at least a sense of you know, form or within that community for yourself through that share.
You see, fundamentally, you know, my point is this: we need to have some assumptions to even survive, and we also need to have assumptions to think. So I'm not denying that the need for assumptions. And beliefs are those assumptions believed to be true, assumed to be true. And when you know that it is only an assumption, there's always an element of a question. So if you come across better assumptions, you will immediately change that. And if you meet a situation in which your assumption doesn't work, you will change this. So there's a relationship when you are a believer. You have one kind of relationship to your assumptions, and that relationship needs to be transformed. And you take assumption as assumptions. You have a different way of living from those who believe in their assumptions to be true. Now, what was I don't know anything, any other, in the Buddhist monastery, Zen Buddhist monastery, we don't believe in anything. We will continue to ask questions so that we can eliminate the beliefs we have. So that's my love for Buddhism, especially Zen Buddhism. It is not based on beliefs. It is based on inquiry and questioning, just like Socrates and today Krishnamurti. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Ilya, just for your reference, Yasuhiko was a Zen Buddhist monk from the age of 16 to I think about 3 years or so. He was a Zen Buddhist monk. Next up, and I think currently you are also officially a Zen Buddhist monk, right? Okay, not practicing, but yes. Okay.
I
next.
just watched Inner and Outer before this, so yeah, I was actually aware.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up is going to be David, Phil, and Ambika. David.
Yeah, yes, thanks, Srikanth, and thank you, Yasuhiko. So, Yasuhiko, you were talking again about beliefs, and I think in psychology, it's a lot about people have inner biases. And there's a lot of technology and knowledge and experience in psychology. And it was something I studied about persuasion techniques. So as you said, a lot of people are mainly speaking of their biases, they're repeating, just sort of regurgitating their inner recording and not really listening, not really changing. But there is a lot of knowledge in psychological operations about how to affect people's biases, how to adjust them. And we can go into politics or anywhere else. There's a lot of, or marketing. So I was curious about your thoughts on that concept and your statement about how to improve communication. That very few people are trained as you or Shrikant or others to really be able to think deeply and question their own beliefs. And is it useful or not useful in the broader society to utilize these sort of persuasion techniques that can influence the biases unconsciously? Is that something to help move the conversation forward, or is that damaging, or is it both?
So that is, the study of crowd psychology has been in existence for over centuries. And mass psychologists, crowd psychologists, they use what they know to manipulate masses' thought. Yeah. Edward Bernays wrote this book, Propaganda, in 1928. That's a long time ago, almost 100 years ago. So they knew exactly how to manipulate people's mind. Now, there is nobody on this planet who is not biased. You see, we all have some assumptions. And the assumption is you assume, and physically, now I'm assuming a particular position and direction to be able to speak with you. If somebody is over there, I'll assume this way. So assumption is physically and metaphysically necessary. And some people's assumption are this way is bias. And other people have this assumption. Communist, capitalist, whatever, democracy or dictatorship, whatever. So, what is important is to become aware of one's own assumptions. You need to have a distance from your assumptions so that you know you are biased, and then based on this particular subject, probably this is the best bias I can have. So you begin to choose your assumptions based on the subject you're dealing with. And also you become aware of those people who try to bias you and manipulate people's bias to get what they want. So this is a matter of awareness of your own assumptions and freedom from your assumptions, so that you become like a scientist in your life, where you begin to formulate your assumptions and continue to modify your assumptions based on the situations and goals and purposes. And also become aware of those manipulated people's biases and assumptions, and help people, make them aware, become aware of those manipulators. And in that sense, a psychologist can be extremely useful because they are very aware of those things. And I am not, this is my personal bias. I am not into any techniques. And so I work with individuals. Whatever works for the person, I use. Mm-hmm. And later on, people may come up with Yasuhiko technique, but it is not my invention, it's somebody else's invention. But you see, psychologists have tremendous function in this society today, extremely important. And I think most important function of psychologists is to really bring people to the awareness of who people are, who they are, mm-hmm. so that they become free internally. They are no longer moved by the external beliefs and inner compulsions. And so, I have profound respect for psychologists and the amazing task they have in their lives.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Phil, followed by Ambika. Phil.
This is kind of a follow-up to my question about the Shadowlands. But integrated were your explanation of the caste system. I really appreciate that it started out as a spiritual system that became externalized in the world as a system of powers.
Yes.
The next part I want to introduce in relationship to this question I got from Foucault, which is used to be that power for many, many millennium was an external power that's exerted on the population that eventually, toward the Enlightenment already, the ruling class seemed to understand that the external power no longer is as workable as used to be, and moved to a kind of inner power that has grown and grown more and more, so now that we are more and more living in the Shadowlands. To the degree that the power that be have a tremendous control in our inner world, through the control of the media, by introducing noise into the system that filters out any counteraction, as well as creating illusions of a reality that you believe in, and therefore structure this inner world into a system that the population truly believe is real. An external introduction to true understanding is therefore itself a mirage. How do you overcome such a powerful system of mind control that has turned all of us into Manchurian candidates, so that we are no longer understanding ourselves, let alone understanding the world? It seems like an overwhelming task in which the power structure is totally imbalanced between what you can do and what the media, such as advertising and marketing, as well as direct control, as would be in China and Russia. So how do you propose to fight against this imbalance of power that exists in the external world?
Great question, Phil. Thank you. Go ahead.
You know, one of my friends is writing a book called The Eternal War. And this eternal war has been going on since time immemorial. The war is between the responsibles and resentfuls. And there are about 20% of humans are responsibles, and 30% are resentfuls. The remaining are called adoptables. And today we can see all the adoptable are taken by the resentfuls. And every aspect of society is controlled by the resentfuls, powers that be. And responsible are saying, scratching their head, what are we going to do? Now, the inner world that I defined initially in this program, inner world, which is a monad, which is who you are as a world and universe. We can be free from those powers in our own experience. We know who those people are. I know what those people are, what they are doing, and I am not under their hypnosis. So I am awake. My world is awake from that power, number one. And so that is always a place to begin for all of us. Your world, your monad can be free from that world, from that force, power, because of your awareness and knowledge, awareness of who you are and how this world is, as a monad, and who those people are, and what and how they are doing what they are doing. Number one. Number two, it is, so from my side, I cannot fight against the White House. No way. And if I go to Washington DC, which is in my backyard, do some kind of things, I'll be sent to jail. So in that sense, I have zero power. My power is the power of ideas, speaking and writing, and to the best of my ability, I do communicate to those people who I think understand me, and create a network of friends who are like me, communicating to the world. And that's second thing. Now I take a jump to deal with this huge power, destructive power, the power that has been in existence since the beginning of time, which has become extremely big and powerful and clever and efficient. It is more difficult to break that power than when our founders of this nation faced. Number one, that power was in a different continent. And that power was trying to influence not only the United States, but India. Their power was kind of spread out. And East India Company, that was behind that political power, also spread out. But today, that power controls the whole planet, including the United States. One thing that I've noticed is that, as I said, as the Lao Tzu said, the movement of Tao, the reversal is a movement of Tao. And we have come to the point of extreme. They have come to the point of extreme. And the cosmos and universe is more powerful than they. And they cannot go against the power of nature, the power of Tao, and power of the universe. And since they have reached the extreme, only movement that will arise from this is the reversal. And theodromia. So my sense is that they are going to self-destruct. After destroying everybody else, they seem to be in the process of destroying themselves. Number one. Number two, common people who may never have read Spinoza, Thomas Jefferson, they are sensing, experiencing something. And they are waking up. And without them being manipulated, the power structure cannot do much. So while intellectuals are still asleep, common people whose lives are impacted by the powers that be's actions are waking up. They may not be able to articulate it, but they are able to sense it, and they know it. They may not understand yet, but they know it. So for two reasons. Number one, because of the movement of the Tao, reversal will take place, and they seem to be destroying themselves. And at the basis, the people waking up. So in the 1 decade time frame, I'm optimistic. So you and I want to survive for about 10 years or so, and then we will see something else arising.
Wonderful. Thank you.
New world is being born because Shiva is self-destroying itself.
Thank you. Next up is Ambika.
Yeah, Om Namah Shivaya. So actually, yeah, thank you. Everything you just shared sort of answers what I was going to ask you next, from going from Phil's Shadowlands to all of this, which is really very beautiful. And I'm hoping for more than 10 years. I think we have, let's make it 50 years, because I think
I'm saying in 10 years, we will see a real,
yeah.
We have reached the extreme. I think we are more like going up. And
Yeah.
in 10 years, we will really see something really changing.
Yes. Yes. So the seeds are being planted, already planted.
Yes.
And the thought came to mind when you talked about the 4 stages that were in Sri Aurobindo's book, and all these things that are happening. What do you feel about, if we could make 3 short stories and film them to illustrate this, as not as a documentary but as a story, because stories people like as it touches them in 3 parts with these principles to also sort of clear out all the damage done by the East India Company. And in fact, after yesterday's class, it's been on my mind what they did there and there and there. And for 1,000 years of invasions into India and the East India Company, and it's personal to me, because they really cut up the Northwest, my family's homes, and the Northeast.
So you see, you are a filmmaker besides being a poet and a scholar. So why don't you make 4 films? So Shrikant knows everybody, so you can ask him. Maybe there are 4 people among his connections. You may be able to find 4 people whose life story can demonstrate those 4 aspects of a divine consciousness. That's wonderful.
And you're part of the story, because part of all of this, because you might be one of the characters, who knows, but we need to enact this. We need to actually make it a story, and we will talk about this again.
We will do that. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to do.
Yes.
Thank you. So Yasuhiko, this is fantastic. This was fantastic presentation. I think the idea of kind of putting the prime mover, realizing that the prime mover is within each of us.
Yeah.
And it is our ability to connect, to communicate.
No,
well,
ability to think, number 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
So our ability to think
and communicate,
and then our ability to communicate, is the thing that will change. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that, I studied these great books, and one of the things that all thinkers agree on, they disagree on everything. But there is one thing they agree on, and that is they think that the current generation is debauched. Everybody thinks that they are going through a really bad time, and they were all wrong, because it can't be true. Okay. Because what happens is that the bad things are very large, and the good things are distributed amongst people who are doing things, and the impact of the good is everywhere, is there. It's not there as a large thing that people can point to. And by the time it happens, it it just happens. At that time, they say, oh, world has changed. But while it is growing, while the seeds are growing, it's difficult to see them because they are separated.
Absolutely, I agree. That movement of reversal is taking place in silence. You know, somebody told me that about 3% of populations do Twitter. Okay, and out of which like 80% are liberals. And out of that liberals, something like 10% is ongoingly saying something. So when you are just on the Twitter, you think that this world is this, but it does not reflect the whole culture of America or world. I'm not saying those people are bad people, but I'm saying there's people who are making sound and noise, a very small minority. But because they are making noise and filling up the space, we get the sense that, you know, they are the majority. And the real movement of history is taking place in silence. And actually, you can sense it. You can sense it. And you only sense it in your world.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. The other thing I wanted to say is that, you know, when I look at children, I see them use the iPhone. I am very encouraged because it's like a 5-year-old. You should see them with the iPhone, how much they are able to do, how easily they are able. And you look at people who are very young, they are not taken in. See, what happens is that most of us are used to what things were like. And we look at things, but that's another reason why all the great thinkers too. It's not just that ordinary people make this mistake, but great things, because it's very easy to see what you have lost.
Yes.
It is very difficult to see what is being gained because it is new and it was not there in your frame at all.
Well said. Absolutely. Yes.
So I agree with you. There is a lot of cause for optimism.
Yes.
And I look forward to having these conversations. And I think what we are doing is one of the things in whatever scale to the positive direction here.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Yasuhiko.
Thank you very much.
Great honor and simple delight. Thank you. Bye.